But so anyways, I wanted to talk to you briefly before we go on to like your background and all that stuff. You were signed with UAA Music. Mm-hmm. So what was that experience like?
So
It was a record label, by the way. I should mention. I didn't say that, but yeah.
Yeah, that was in 2013.
United Artists? What's UAC?
Yeah, it was like United Artists Alliance.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't the United, like the big one.
Yeah, sorry.
So it was a company out of LA, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's what I read.
And it was surprising, like this first time I had gone through that process of like officially being with the label and seeing how the little details mattered so much. Everything from a photo shoot, they're making sure I didn't have anything that had labels on it and stuff like that, to the shows that they would put on and how everything was meticulously set up. But with them, for the most part, they just took the music that I had already recorded and put it out there.
Distributed it, yeah. And this is, so you said you signed with them in 2013.
Yeah.
This is like kind of right when streaming was starting to become the thing, right?
I guess so, yeah.
So were they able to, it probably wasn't as sophisticated at that point as it is now, but I mean, was that like an aspect of their distribution? Were they like getting your stuff on there and be like able to like, get you visibility on those platforms?
Kinda.
Yeah.
They ended up going defunct a couple years later.
Yeah.
So I didn't really realize a lot from that experience as far as them putting out, because the plan was that not only was I going to be, they were going to be promoting my original stuff, but I was also going to be contributing to a lot of the other artists on the album.
Okay.
And before a lot of that really got to take off and was going, they were just disappearing.
Wow. I guess it's kind of typical of like smaller labels though, right? I mean, it's hard to keep that stuff going, especially nowadays where it's like you can't really produce a record or like, finance a record and then expect a return on sales anymore. Doesn't really happen.
No.
So I'm genuinely curious about the role that labels play today and how they recoup their investment,
There was a report that just came out a couple of days ago that showed the independent artists how much that has grown and how much labels are not needed as much anymore.
Yeah.
Because even when you are represented by a label, unless you're one of their top artists, you just usually everything that you make is going to go right back to them to pay for all their expenses. And I mean, I can do that myself.
Right.
I got my 38 cents from Spotify this month.
Right. You're banking, bro.
Banking.
You should see our fucking bank account from that. Yeah, like and there's also like other ways. I feel like private investors are another way to go as well. And there's just like a lot of different avenues to explore now, because there's ways that you can like to limit the way you pay back a label to just record sales or now streaming. Really, it seems like that's a life sentence almost, because it pays virtually nothing. And unless you're getting like hundreds of thousands of streams, you're not really seeing a huge check from that.
Right.
So,
I'd have to imagine they got their hands in the pockets of either people that own or not own, but like curate playlists and stuff like that,
Totally.
and they're able to give money that way.
Yeah.
And then also, like I'm sure you do make a lot of money. Well, probably not even that much money off Spotify when you got like 1 billion plays or whatever. But it's supposed to be for getting you to come to the show and buy the merch and everything like that. So, yeah, it really does suck, because that's kind of out of the picture now, isn't it?
Because that means that the label has to recoup it on that end then, which already sucks, because if you're operating at that level, you have representations, right? So you have like management and booking, which both of those off the top are taking their, whatever, 15, 20% sometimes. So that's 40% of your check from that night going to them. And then you got to cut the label in on top of that. You might be making half of whatever whatever you made at the door, guarantees, whatever. So it just seems like a useless endeavor to get linked up with a label.
Yeah, well, with that said, like I do have friends that have done very well. And usually what ends up happening is like 10 10, 15 years after they've had like a repertoire built up, and then they just keep compounding on top of that. At that point, then I know quite a few people that have done extremely well.
So it's a long-term investment.
It's very long-term. And then I have a couple other friends that write for a lot of the major country acts.
Yeah.
And they've got platinum albums themselves because they got the credits, the writing credits, and this is a whole nother stream of revenue.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I guess that if you have the real value they offer, like the resources, right? So it's like a label has, they have the resources. They have access to management companies and booking agencies and publishing companies and all the ways to get yourself out there,
right?
That you might not have access to yourself, So,
and then a little bit of grease on the wheel with all the money that they did have before,
right?
And if anything, they're taking away all the production that they used to do before, which was paying the retail outlets like Walmart and FYE and all those places like that to put their album in there, and then also produce the actual physical thing.
And they're also not
distribution. So
and they're also not really engaging like in artist development anymore.
So all that money may have gone to something else, which probably would be to the curating of the playlist, and then also somehow it's just all advertisement at this point. And it's a weird thing to even call a label anymore.
Yeah, well, because
what do they do?
Well, because also like the deals aren't what they were 30 years ago. So it's not like you sign a contract and then they're going to develop you and then you get $1 million advance to write a record and if make it back because you're on sales, right? So like if you want to work with a label, you have to already have developed your brand. Yeah. So they're saving a lot of money and time and resources on that end of it. Plus they're only cutting you maybe like a $50,000 deal now, right? Versus like, $500,000 or $1 million. So it's much easier to recoup that when you're spending, twice, when you're spending that same amount on advertising on the platforms and especially the streaming services, it becomes much easier to recoup $100,000.
Yeah.
When most of the work has already been done for you, So it's kind of still a pretty profitable racket. You know what I mean?
Sure. The last thing I'll say about it is that they were always the one on the cutting edge, like in front of everybody from the beginning, almost the gatekeepers of music back in the 90s and 2000s before streaming. So you got to imagine that they were pivoting before anybody else was.
Oh, for sure.
So I think they're doing all right.
Yeah, they are. I think there was a number that I read recently.
But I could be wrong. Like you said, there's an article coming out, right? That doesn't look very good. There's no reason to do it now.
The record labels were still doing very well.
Oh, okay,
but they were showing the amount of independent artists in the past, I think it was maybe the past 5 years, how they used a pretty low bar. It was like the number of people on Spotify that made over $10,000. And the number of that thing is like 2 million people total.
$10,000 over what period of time?
A year.
A year, okay.
Yeah. And then it went up to, how many made 100,000, 500,000, million. And they had a graph that just showed the independent artists, and it was growing the whole time.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was growing more down on the low end, but it was definitely growing in all aspects.
I mean, steady growth is better than no growth. And I think the number that I saw was something like labels are, and you guys can fact check me on this, I think something that labels are making like $100 million collectively an hour off of streaming platforms.
How's that possible?
It's collect the entire label industry, not just like one label.
An hour?
Yeah. You can fact check me on that for sure.
100 million?
Pretty sure I saw that.
So it's $2.4 billion a day?
I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're wrong.
Well, it depends on it depends on how many label. I mean, I don't know the amount of labels that are out there.
Maybe you're right. That would be crazy. That's right.
Like the major ones, though. Obviously, you know what I mean.
I just don't really get
over $1 million per hour.
Million
Sorry, not 100 million. But still, that's insane. Major labels now earn over.
It's like 100 times less insane.
I'm wondering,